show you how to make a fondant basketball net and basketball. To start, I totally forgot to film this, but this is a 5-inch cake and it's covered in black fondant and you see little marks around the very top edge. What I did, I wrapped a tape measure around the cake and then I took a little Dresden tool and I marked at the very top of the cake every 2 inches. And these are the lines where I'm going to be putting the fondant for the nets. So you have to just mark that in advance. I need to measure how long each strip of fondant needs to be. It needs to be way longer than the cake, so I want to do each one at least 7 inches. So I'm lubing up the inside of a little clay gun there with some Crisco, and I got some white fondant in here that does have Tylose powder mixed into the fondant. This is marshmallow fondant. You don't want the fondant to be too soft because it's going to fall apart, and it can't be too crunchy because it's going to break. So it just needs to be the right consistency, and I'm squeezing it out here to get all of these little ropes. And remember, I wanted each one to be at least 7 inches, if not longer. So that ruler was 6 inches long, and now I'm just making sure that all of them are at least 7 inches. And I have 10 sections here, and you need 2 strips per section. So I needed 20 strips total, and getting a little bit of water underneath it and then sticking it down. And whoops, you need to make sure that you press that down. Do you see how it's hanging over the top edge just slightly? That way it's not going to completely fall off. This is fondant. I'm putting fondant on top of fondant. Fondant sticks better to fondant, so I prefer to do it on fondant rather than buttercream. And once I have all of these strips on here, I'm taking one from the left, one from the right, and I'm crossing it and then twisting it again, and then I'm going to get a little bit of water behind it and then push that down. You need to make sure you don't get too much water behind it because then you're going to be able to see a watermark. Then I'm doing it again. Twist, twist, get a little bit of water behind it and press it down. Do it again. Twist one, cross it over, and then twist, and then get water behind it and press it down. And I want to make sure that all of these are even. So I want them to be basically in the same row. So I went back to look at it. It looks like that one was a little too high. So I want to make sure that they are all even across in a line. If they're not even going straight across, it's going to look a little off. So here's the last one. Cross it over, twist it, get a little bit of water behind it, and press it down. And now I'm spinning it just to make sure that they are all in a straight line. Now I have to do the second row. So I'm doing it the same process, getting one from the left, one from the right, twisting it, getting water behind it, and press it down. And when you're doing this, you need to make sure you're not pulling the fondant too hard. I'm lightly just crossing it and twisting it and then getting the water behind it and pressing it down. If you pull the fondant too hard, it's going to distort the shape of the net. It's going to look a little weird. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the third row, grabbing one from the left, one from the right, and repeating this process the entire way around here. I do have a picture close for reference. That way I can look at it, make sure I'm doing it right. And whoops, I pulled a little bit too hard and broke that piece. So I got a little bit of water behind it. You need to be careful. This fondant is pretty delicate. It does have the Tylose powder in it, so it's not going to crack. But if you pull too hard, it is going to break it. So you just have, I'm using a very light touch as I'm handling these because I really don't want them to break. And now I'm getting pretty close to the bottom. It gets a little bit more challenging to work as you get closer to the cake drum, but still just use a gentle hand and take your time, be patient, and you'll get it. So now we're at the very bottom and I need to cut off the excess netting, if you will. So I just use my X-Acto knife and cut it in on an angle a little bit, and I'm getting a little bit of water behind each piece and sticking it to the black fondant. This way it gives it a pretty polished and clean look at the very bottom of the cake. So here is the net all on that black fondant. How cool does that look? Now I want to make the rim, so I'm rolling out some pink fondant. Again, it does have that Tylose powder in it, and I picked it up and I'm just wrapping it around there. I cut off the excess, and then I just want to pull it to the very edges so it's covering those white pieces on the very top. And then what I'm going to do is get a little bit of water underneath the pink fondant where it's touching the white fondant just to adhere it to the netting. And I got a little bit of water in the seam in the very back where that piece of fondant meets, and I'm just using my fingers to press that down just to smooth it out and make sure that there's no lumps. Now I want to make the basketball, so I printed that out the size of that circle cutter here. I rolled that fondant out probably about half to an inch thick. I'm using my Dresden tool to trace these lines on here, and I'm pressing down with that circle cutter so I can get the edge, and then I'm deepening these lines with my Dresden tool. I want to fill the lines with some fondant, so it needs to be deep enough. And these pieces here, I just don't want to drag it through there because I don't want to distort all of those lines. So I'm working in little sections here to get that cross line in here. And again, just going over it just to deepen the lines. And then I'm making an impression with that circle cutter. It's not really a cutter, it's the lid to something, but it's perfect size. So then I'm squeezing some pink fondant out of that clay gun. And again, I'm just deepening these lines here so that pink fondant will fit in there. And then I'm cutting that excess fondant away, and then I'm flipping it over, smoothing it from the back, and then I'm going to smooth it from the very front. This is going on the top of the cake, so it needs to look nice and pretty from both sides. And then I'm just deepening the lines on the sides as well because I'm going to bring the pink line around to the side. You'll see what I mean. Get a little bit of water in there, and then I'm taking that pink fondant and just putting it in that indentation and cutting off the excess and pressing it down. Now for the piece that goes across, I need to press that pink fondant down so I can basically put that other pink fondant piece on it without it looking a little too lumpy, if you will. So I press them down, and then again, I'm just getting some water down and filling that in. And here is the basketball. I did let it dry overnight, and then I got a skewer and two toothpicks in there, and then I got a little bit of piping gel underneath it, and then put that in the very top of the cake. And how cool is this? Now, I have done this quite a few times. The very first time I did it, do you see the net on the top tier of this? I didn't cut the individual pieces long enough and I ran out, so I couldn't continue the pattern all the way down to the very bottom of the cake. So it's very important that you cut them really long. That way you could just trim off the excess once you're finished the pattern. And that's how you make a fondant basketball and net. It's super easy and super fun and perfect for a sports themed cake.